Ryan Mitchell's hands were black with engine grease as he worked on the broken hyperdrive units spread across his workbench. The repair shop was small, just 3 rooms on the lower level of Station Obsidian, but it was his. After everything he'd been through, having something that belonged to him felt important. The station hummed with its usual afternoon activity. Traders arguing over prices in a dozen different languages. Ships docking and undocking with metallic clangs that echoed through the walls. The smell of recycled air mixed with machine oil and alien food from the restaurant next door. 5 years had passed since the war ended. 5 years since the last shots were fired between humans and the Kryn Empire. Both sides had signed treaties, exchanged prisoners, and pretended the whole thing had been worth it. Politicians called it a victory. Soldiers like Ryan just called it survival. He tried not to think about those days anymore. Tried to focus on fixing engines and helping travelers who needed repairs. Simple work. Honest work. No shooting. No dying. No impossible choices. But some memories refused to stay buried. Her face appeared in his mind without warning, the way it often did when he was tired or working with his hands. The little Kryn girl. He didn't even know her name. Just remembered those eyes, large and golden like all Kryn, but filled with a terror no child should ever experience. It had been during the siege of Korvax's colony. The fighting had lasted 3 weeks. Buildings reduced to rubble. Bodies everywhere. The Kryn forces were pushing hard and human troops were falling back block by block. Ryan's unit had been ordered to evacuate from a forward position. They were running through the ruins when he heard it. A small sound, barely audible over the distant explosions. Crying. A child crying. He should have kept moving. Should have followed orders and regrouped with his team. The Kryn were the enemy. They'd killed thousands of humans. Destroyed colonies. Started the whole damn war in the first place. But the crying didn't sound like an enemy. It sounded like a scared kid. He'd found her in what used to be someone's home. Just a corner of wall still standing, creating a small pocket of shelter. She was maybe 6 years old, her purple skin covered in gray dust from the collapsed building. Her clothes were torn. She had a cut on her forehead that had bled down the side of her face. When she saw him, she'd screamed. Tried to crawl backward into the rubble. To her, he was the monster. The human soldier in combat armor carrying weapons. He was everything she'd been taught to fear. Ryan had removed his helmet slowly, showing his face. He'd raised his hands, trying to look non-threatening. He didn't speak Kryn, and she clearly didn't speak human standard. But fear was universal. So was kindness. He'd stayed with her. Found a bunker underneath a collapsed medical station where they could hide. Shared his military rations, which she ate hesitantly at first, then hungrily. He'd cleaned the cut on her forehead with water from his canteen. Wrapped her in his thermal blanket when she shivered during the cold nights. For 3 days they'd hidden together while the battle raged above. Kryn patrols passed within meters of their position. Ryan had kept her quiet, hand gently over her mouth, whispering sounds that he hoped were soothing even though she couldn't understand the words. On the 4th day he'd spotted a civilian evacuation transport. The Kryn military was pulling non-combatants out of the combat zone. It was his only chance to get her somewhere safe. He'd waited until dark, then carried her through 2 kilometers of active battlefield. Every shadow could have been an enemy. Every sound could have been his death. But he'd made it to the evacuation point and placed her with other Kryn civilians. She'd looked back at him one last time before boarding the transport. Those golden eyes weren't filled with fear anymore. He wasn't sure what he saw there. Confusion maybe. Or gratitude. He'd never know. 20 minutes later, his unit's position was overrun. Ryan was captured along with 12 other soldiers. 8 months in a Kryn prison camp followed. 8 months of wondering if that little girl had made it, if saving her had been worth it, if anyone would ever know what he'd done. The war ended while he was still imprisoned. Treaty signed. Prisoners exchanged. Ryan came home to a hero's welcome he didn't want and nightmares he couldn't escape. He'd eventually made his way to Station Obsidian, a neutral trading post where humans and Kryn and 100 other species did business together. It seemed like a good place to disappear. To start over. To maybe find some kind of peace. The shop door opened with its usual chime, pulling Ryan back to the present. He looked up, expecting to see one of his regular customers. Maybe old Pete who ran the cantina and kept breaking his food processor. Or Lisa from the medical bay who needed her scanner recalibrated. Instead he froze completely. A Kryn warrior stood in the doorway. She was tall, easily 7 feet, with the natural purple skin of her species. But this wasn't a civilian. She wore full military armor, dark and decorated with symbols Ryan recognized from his combat days. I rank, officer class, combat veteran. Her hand rested casually on the plasma rifle attached to her hip. Not threatening but not exactly friendly either. The three other customers in Ryan's shop reacted immediately. A Talvex trader grabbed his purchase and practically ran for the back exit. Two human freight workers pressed themselves against the wall, eyes wide. Even 5 years after the war, seeing a Kryn soldier in full armor triggered deep survival instincts. Ryan stood slowly, setting down his tools. His own hand didn't move toward the pistol he kept under the counter. Not yet. But he was aware of exactly where it was. The Kryn warrior's golden eyes scanned the shop, taking in every detail. Professional assessment. Looking for threats. Looking for exits. Ryan recognized the behavior because he'd done the same thing 1,000 times during the war. Then her eyes settled on him. Locked onto his face with an intensity that made his skin prickle. She knew him. Somehow, this Kryn warrior knew exactly who he was. The shop had gone completely silent. Even the usual station noises seemed muted. Ryan could hear his own heartbeat, feel the old combat awareness flooding back despite years of trying to leave it behind. Ryan Mitchell? The Kryn warrior asked. Her voice was strong, controlled, speaking human standard with only a slight accent. Ryan's mouth was dry. That's me. Can I help you? She took a step forward. Not aggressive, but deliberate. Her armor made soft mechanical sounds as she moved. Yes, she said. You can help me understand something I've spent 2 years trying to find. Ryan stood there, grease rag still in his hands, trying to process what was happening. The Kryn warrior took another step closer, and he noticed people outside the shop had stopped what they were doing. Faces pressed against windows. A crowd forming. This wasn't normal. Kryn soldiers didn't just walk into human businesses on neutral stations. Not alone. Not unarmed like this. My name is Thera, the warrior said. Her voice was controlled, professional, but Ryan could hear something else underneath. Emotion held tightly in check. She reached slowly into her armor, movements deliberate so he wouldn't think she was going for a weapon. From an inner pocket, she pulled out a small metallic device. She activated it with a tap of her finger. A holographic image appeared in the air between them, hovering at eye level. Ryan's breath stopped completely. It was a young Kryn girl, maybe 11 years old now. She had the same purple skin, the same golden eyes. But these eyes weren't filled with terror. She was smiling at the camera, holding some kind of stuffed toy. She looked healthy, happy, alive. Ryan's hands started shaking. He knew that face. Older now, but he knew it. The memories came flooding back with brutal clarity. The rubble. The crying. 3 days of hiding together while death walked overhead. You know her, Thera said. It wasn't a question. She was watching his reaction carefully. Ryan couldn't speak for a moment. His throat felt tight. 5 years ago, he finally managed. During the siege of Korvax. I found her in the ruins. She was hiding in what was left of a building. Thera's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Pain maybe. Or memory of pain. You protected her, she said quietly. For 3 days. You gave her your food. You kept her safe when you could have left her to die. When my people were killing yours. When you had every reason to hate us. Ryan looked down at the grease rag in his hands, then back at the hologram. The smiling child. She was just a kid. I couldn't just leave her there. Most would have, Thera said. Her voice had lost some of its hard edge. Most did. We found 17 children dead in that sector. All killed by bombing or crossfire. No one stopped to help them. No one cared. Outside the shop, the crowd was growing larger. Ryan could see security officers pushing through, responding to reports of an armed Kryn on the station. This was about to get complicated. That child is my daughter, Thera continued, and now her voice definitely cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to reveal the mother underneath the warrior. Her name is Lyra. She survived because of you, Ryan Mitchell. She lived because one human soldier decided a Kryn child's life mattered more than his orders. More than his safety. Ryan felt something break loose in his chest. 5 years he'd wondered. 5 years of nightmares and questions and hoping that girl had made it to somewhere safe. And now he knew. She'd lived. She had a name. Lyra. I've been searching for you for 2 years, Thera said, taking another step closer. They were only a few feet apart now. When Lyra was old enough to talk about what happened, she told me about the human soldier. The kind one who sang to her. Who shared his food. Who carried her through fire to save her life. She paused, studying his face like she was trying to memorize it. I had to know who you were. I had to understand why a human would do this. The war told us you were monsters. Destroyers. Things to be feared and eliminated. Through the windows, Ryan could see the security officers getting closer. More people were gathering. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. A Kryn warrior in full armor wasn't just unusual on this station. It was threatening. War memories ran deep for everyone. She was a kid, Ryan said again because he didn't know what else to say. That's all that mattered. Not what species she was. Not which side we were on. She was terrified and alone and I couldn't just walk away. Thera stared at him for a long moment. The hologram between them flickered, showing another image now. Lyra a bit younger, maybe 8, playing with other Kryn children in what looked like a schoolyard. Then another image. Lyra reading a book. Another. Lyra with Thera both smiling at the camera. You gave me these moments, Thera said quietly. Every birthday. Every achievement. Every time I tucked her in at night. Every time she laughed. You gave me all of it. Because without you she would be dust and bones in the ruins of Korvax. The security officers reached the shop door. Everyone stay calm, one of them called out, hand on his weapon. Ma'am, we need you to step back from. What happened next shocked everyone in the growing crowd. Thera reached down and unclipped her plasma rifle from her hip. Several people gasped. Security officers drew their weapons. Ryan tensed, ready to dive for cover. But Thera didn't point the weapon at anyone. She carefully, deliberately, set it on the ground at her feet. The rifle clattered against the metal floor, now harmless and out of reach. Then she did something Ryan had never seen a Kryn warrior do. She knelt. Not a tactical position. A full kneel, one knee on the ground, posture formal and precise. She placed her right fist over her heart in a gesture Ryan recognized from cultural briefings during the war. It was a Kryn expression of deep respect. Reserved for honored elders and heroes. Things sacred to their culture. You have my eternal gratitude, Ryan Mitchell, Thera said, her voice carrying through the now silent shop. By the old ways and the blood laws of my people, I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me my reason for living. Ryan stood frozen, completely overwhelmed. The grease rag fell from his hands. Around them, the crowd had gone absolutely quiet. Security officers had lowered their weapons, confused and uncertain. Please don't do that, Ryan finally said, his voice rough. He stepped forward, reaching down to help her up. Please. I don't want gratitude or debts or anything like that. I just wanted her to be okay. That's all. Thera looked up at him from her kneeling position. Her golden eyes were wet. Ryan hadn't known Kryn could cry. That's exactly why the debt matters, she said. You ask for nothing. You expect nothing. You simply did what was right when the entire universe told you it was wrong. She accepted his hand and stood, towering over him again. But something had changed in her posture. The rigid military bearing had softened slightly. The war taught us that humans were cruel, Thera said, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. That you destroyed without mercy. That you valued only your own kind. My daughter proved that was a lie. One human soldier, in the middle of hell, chose compassion over hate. She picked up her rifle and holstered it again, movements slow and non-threatening. I came here to thank you, Ryan Mitchell. To let you know that what you did mattered. That it changed everything. Ryan didn't know what to say. He felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Humans and Kryn and other species, all watching this moment. How is she? He finally asked. Lyra. Is she really okay? Thera's expression softened completely then, the warrior mask falling away to reveal just a mother. She's brilliant, she said with unmistakable pride. Top of her class. Studying engineering. She wants to build bridges between species. Says she learned from a human soldier that kindness matters more than sides. She deactivated the hologram and put the device away. She asks about you sometimes. Wonders if the kind soldier made it home. Wonders if he's safe. I'm safe, Ryan said quietly. And I'm really glad she is too. Ryan reached out instinctively and pulled Thera to her feet. She was heavy, the armor adding significant weight, but she rose smoothly. Her golden eyes met his, filled with something that looked almost like confusion. Please don't do that, Ryan said, uncomfortable with the formal gesture. I just did what anyone should do. What anyone decent would do. No, Thera said firmly, her voice regaining its strength. You did what most wouldn't. What most couldn't. In my culture, what you've done creates a life debt. A bond that cannot be broken. I must repay what you've given me. Ryan shook his head, stepping back. I don't want anything. Really. Knowing she's alive, seeing that she's okay, that's more than enough. That's everything. The crowd outside had grown larger. Ryan could see people recording on their devices. This would be all over the station's network within the hour. Kryn warrior kneels to human mechanic. The headlines would write themselves. That's exactly why the debt matters, Thera said, and her expression softened just slightly. The hard warrior mask cracked, showing something more vulnerable underneath. Humans protect others even when it costs them everything. Even when it makes no sense. Even when survival says to walk away. She gestured broadly, encompassing the station around them. The war taught us that humans were monsters. Cruel. Destructive. Caring only for yourselves. Every piece of propaganda, every military briefing, every news report said the same thing. Humanity was a plague to be eliminated. Her voice dropped lower, more personal. Then my daughter came home from a war zone and told me about a human soldier who sang to her in a language she couldn't understand. Who gave her his food when he was starving. Who risked his life to save hers when she was his enemy. You proved everything we were told was a lie. Before Ryan could respond, heavy footsteps approached from outside. 3 station security officers pushed through the crowd, hands on their weapons. The lead officer, a stern-faced man named Peterson that Ryan knew from previous encounters, looked extremely nervous. Is there a problem here? Peterson asked, his eyes fixed on Thera's armor and the plasma rifle at her hip. His hand hovered near his stunner. We received multiple reports of an armed Kryn in the commercial sector. Ryan stepped slightly between Peterson and Thera without really thinking about it. No problem, he said quickly. She's just a customer. We're talking. Everything's fine. Peterson's eyes narrowed. A customer? Ryan, that's a Kryn combat officer in full military gear. This doesn't look like a normal repair consultation. And she's welcome here, Ryan interrupted, his voice firm. She hasn't threatened anyone. Hasn't broken any laws. There's no trouble. The 2 other security officers exchanged glances. One of them muttered something into his comm unit. Peterson looked like he wanted to argue, but technically Ryan was right. Thera hadn't actually done anything illegal. Carrying weapons was allowed on the station as long as they weren't drawn in a threatening manner. Thera turned to look at Ryan, and the surprise in her golden eyes was unmistakable. You defend me? She asked, her voice carrying genuine shock. After what my people did to yours? After the colonies we destroyed? The thousands of humans who died? Ryan met her gaze steadily. The war's over. Has been for 5 years. And you're not your people any more than I'm mine. Right now, you're just a mother who came to find the man who helped her daughter. That's all I need to know. Peterson still looked doubtful. Ryan, regulations say we need to. Regulations say she's allowed to be here as long as she's peaceful. Ryan cut him off. And she is. So unless you want to start discriminating against people based on their species, which I'm pretty sure violates about 6 different station laws, then we're good here. The security officers looked at each other again. Peterson's jaw was tight, clearly unhappy with the situation, but he couldn't argue with the logic. Fine. But we'll be keeping an eye on this. Any sign of trouble? There won't be, Ryan assured him. I promise. The officers backed off slowly, moving to the edge of the growing crowd but not leaving entirely. The message was clear. They were watching. Waiting for any excuse to intervene. Thera continued to stare at Ryan like she was seeing him for the first time. You really meant it, she said quietly. When you saved Lyra. It wasn't a moment of weakness or temporary insanity. This is who you are. I'm just a mechanic trying to get by, Ryan said, uncomfortable with the attention. No, Thera said. You're more than that. Lyra was right about you. She told me the human soldier was kind. That he had gentle eyes despite his weapons. That he made her feel safe when everything was falling apart. She paused and something painful crossed her face. I thought it was a child's imagination. Children see what they want to see, make heroes out of ordinary people. But she saw clearly. She saw you. Around them the crowd was still watching, still recording. Ryan could hear whispered conversations. Some people looked moved. Others looked skeptical. A few looked angry, probably war veterans who couldn't see past old hatreds. Where is she now? Ryan asked, redirecting the conversation. Lyra. Is she here on the station? Thera's expression changed immediately. The softness vanished, replaced by something darker. Worry. Fear even. Her hand unconsciously went to the weapon at her hip. That's why I really came, she said, her voice dropping so only Ryan could hear. It's not just to thank you, though I needed to do that. I came because I need your help again. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Thera glanced at the security officers, at the crowd, at all the recording devices pointed their way. Not here. Too many years. Too many people who can't be trusted. She pulled out a small data chip and pressed it into Ryan's hand. My ship berth number and access codes. Come tonight after your shop closes. Come alone. Please. Is Lyra in danger? Ryan asked, the words coming out harder than he intended. Thera's golden eyes met his, and the fear in them was real. Raw. The kind of fear only a parent protecting their child could understand. Yes, she said simply. And I can't protect her alone. Not from this. Ryan's hand closed around the data chip. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea. Getting involved with a Kryn military officer, secret meetings, possible danger. He'd left that life behind. He was done with war and violence and impossible choices. But then he thought about the little girl in the rubble. The terrified child who'd trusted him when she had no reason to. Who was alive now because he'd made one good choice in the middle of hell. I'll be there, Ryan said. Thera's expression showed relief, but also something else. Respect maybe. Or recognition. Thank you, she said. For this. For everything. She turned to leave, then paused. Lyra asks about you sometimes. Wonders what happened to the kind soldier. If you made it home safe. Thera looked back at him. I can tell her you did. That you're still kind. Still protecting people who need it. Then she walked through the crowd, people parting nervously to let the armored warrior pass. Ryan watched her go, the data chip feeling heavy in his palm. Peterson approached once Thera was out of sight. You sure you know what you're doing, Ryan? Ryan looked down at the chip. Thought about a child's smile in a hologram. Thought about 3 days of keeping someone safe when the world was ending. No, he admitted. But I'm going to do it anyway. Ryan closed his shop early, putting up the security shutters and locking the front door. The crowd had mostly dispersed, though he could still see a few people lingering outside, probably hoping for more drama. He ignored them and headed to the back room where Thera was waiting. She was pacing like a caged predator, her armor making soft mechanical sounds with each movement. The moment Ryan entered, she activated a small device that emitted a faint humming sound. Privacy field. Whatever she was about to say, she didn't want anyone else hearing it. Lyra is in danger, Thera said immediately, no build-up or gentle introduction. Just the blunt truth. Her whole demeanor had changed from the grateful mother in the shop to something harder. Military. Alert. Serious danger. Ryan felt his stomach drop. What kind of danger? Thera stopped pacing and faced him directly. There are extremists among my people. A growing faction that believes the peace treaty was a mistake. That humans are still the enemy and always will be. That's not exactly new information, Ryan said carefully. There are extremist groups on both sides. Human and Kryn. They pop up occasionally, get shut down, repeat. These are different, Thera said, her voice tight. They don't just hate humans. They hate anyone they consider corrupted by human contact. Any Kryn who shows sympathy toward your species. Any Kryn who was helped by humans during the war. They believe these individuals are tainted. Weak. A threat to our racial purity. The words made Ryan feel sick. He'd heard similar rhetoric before. It never ended well. They're targeting people who were refugees? Who were rescued. They're targeting Lyra specifically, Thera said, and her voice cracked slightly despite her obvious effort to stay controlled. They learned about what you did. About how a human soldier saved a Kryn child during Korvax. To them, she's not a survivor. She's a symbol of weakness. Proof that some Kryn accepted help from the enemy. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. They're going after a kid? A teenager who didn't do anything except survive. In their eyes, she should have died rather than accept human assistance, Thera said bitterly. They've published manifestos calling her contaminated. They've threatened both of us. They want to make an example, show that cooperation with humans leads only to death. Where is she now? Ryan asked immediately. Here. On this station. I brought her here 3 days ago because it's neutral territory. Multiple species. Good security. I thought we'd be safe while I searched for you. Thera's expression darkened. But they followed us. I've spotted their surveillance. At least 6 operatives that I know of. Probably more. Ryan's mind was already shifting into tactical mode, old training coming back despite years of trying to forget it. You're Kryn military. High rank from the looks of your armor. You can't handle 6 extremists. I can protect her from many threats, Thera admitted. But there are too many of them and I can't be everywhere at once. They're patient. Professional. They'll wait for the right moment when my guard is down. When she's vulnerable. And then they'll strike. She looked directly at Ryan and he saw the desperation there. The fear of a mother who'd do anything to save her child. I need help. Someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who's already proven they value her life above their own safety. Ryan didn't even hesitate. Where is she? Right now. I'll help however I can. Thera stared at him for a long moment, and something like wonder crossed her face. You would protect her again? Risk yourself for a Kryn child? Even knowing that other Kryn want to kill her for the crime of surviving? She's not a Kryn child, Ryan said firmly. She's just a child. A kid who's being hunted because some fanatics can't let go of hate. That's all I need to know. Now where? The explosion cut him off. Massive. Close. The entire shop shook, tools falling from shelves. Emergency alarms started blaring throughout the station, loud and insistent. Red warning lights flashed in the corridors visible through the shop windows. Thera's communicator came alive immediately with rapid Kryn speech. Ryan didn't understand the language, but he understood the tone. Urgent. Panicked. Bad news. Thera's face went pale, her purple skin taking on an almost gray tint. No, she whispered. Then louder, speaking into her comm in Kryn, her voice sharp and commanding. What happened? Ryan demanded. They're here, Thera said, already moving toward the door. They've breached the station's lower docking bay. Set off an explosive to create chaos. Station security is responding, but they're spread thin. This is the diversion. Ryan was already grabbing his plasma pistol from under the counter, checking the charge. Full. He kept it maintained out of habit, never really expecting to use it again. Diversion for what? For getting to Lyra, Thera said, her voice hard as steel. While everyone's focused on the docking bay, they'll move on her position. Ryan slammed a fresh power cell into the pistol and activated it. The familiar weight felt wrong and right at the same time. Let's go. They ran through the corridors together, moving against the flow of panicking civilians. People were fleeing toward the central safe zones, following emergency protocols. Ryan and Thera pushed past them, heading toward the residential sector. The station's layout worked in their favor. Ryan knew these corridors well after 2 years living here. He took shortcuts through maintenance passages, avoiding the main routes that would be clogged with evacuees. Thera kept pace easily, her longer stride and Kryn physiology making her naturally faster. But she stayed close to Ryan, protective even now. They turned a corner into a longer corridor that would take them directly to the residential levels. 3 figures stood blocking the path ahead. Kryn. All 3 wearing matte black armor with red symbols painted across the chest plates. The symbols looked like old clan markings, twisted and corrupted into something angry and hateful. When they saw Thera, all 3 raised their weapons. Energy rifles, illegal military-grade hardware that shouldn't be on a civilian station. Traitor, one of them shouted, his voice distorted by his helmet speakers. You disgrace our people. You and your contaminated spawn. I honor our people, Thera shouted back, her voice filled with fury. You dishonor them with your cowardice. Targeting children. Hiding behind manifestos and bombs. The child should have died with honor, another extremist screamed. Not lived as a human's pet. The fight erupted before anyone could say more. The extremists opened fire, energy bolts scorching the walls. Thera moved with incredible speed, combat training making her a blur of controlled violence. She drew her plasma rifle and returned fire while simultaneously diving for cover. Ryan went low, rolling behind a support column as bolts seared the air where he'd been standing. His combat instincts kicked in completely now, years of training overriding the peaceful mechanic he'd tried to become. Thera was devastating. She moved with precision that only came from decades of military service. Each shot calculated. Each movement purposeful. Within seconds she dropped one extremist and wounded another. But Ryan saw what she was doing. Even in the middle of the fight, she was positioning herself between him and the enemy. Protecting him. She knew humans were physically weaker than Kryn. Knew he was more vulnerable to their weapons. She was fighting 2 battles at once, trying to eliminate threats while keeping him safe. Ryan couldn't let her fight alone while protecting him. He moved from cover, using angles the extremists weren't expecting. Humans didn't have Kryn strength or speed, but they had something else. Adaptability. Endurance. The ability to keep going when their body said stop. He fired at the wounded extremist, forcing him back into cover. Then used the distraction to move to a better position. The remaining unwounded extremist turned toward him, rifle tracking. Ryan didn't try to outrun the weapon. Instead, he dove forward, getting inside the Kryn's firing arc. The extremist was stronger, bigger, better armed. But Ryan was desperate and trained and absolutely unwilling to let anything stop him from getting to Lyra. He grabbed a piece of debris from the damaged wall and slammed it against the extremist's helmet. The Kryn staggered, and Ryan fired point-blank into his armor's power cell. The extremist went down hard, his armor system shorting out. Thera finished the wounded one with a precise shot, then immediately swung her rifle toward the last extremist still standing. He raised his hands, dropping his weapon. "You can't protect her forever," he spat. "More coming. She'll die contaminated and you'll die a traitor." Thera moved faster than Ryan could track and struck the extremist with the butt of her rifle, knocking him unconscious. She stood over him, breathing hard, rage and fear warring on her face. "You fight well," she said, looking at Ryan with something like respect. "Better than I expected." "You fight better," Ryan replied honestly, checking his pistol's charge. "Down to 60%. But we don't have time for compliments. Let's get to Lyra." Thera nodded, already moving. "Follow me." "And Ryan? Thank you. For not running. For staying when you could have walked away." "Not a chance," Ryan said, falling into step beside her. "I didn't save her 5 years ago just to let someone kill her now." They moved fast through the residential sector, Thera leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd already mapped every corridor and exit. Ryan stayed close, his pistol ready, scanning for threats. The station's alarms were still blaring, emergency lights flashing in rhythmic patterns that made everything feel even more chaotic. Thera stopped at a reinforced door marked with residential security codes. She pressed her palm against the scanner and spoke something in Kryn. The door hissed open, revealing a small apartment that had clearly been set up as a defensive position. 2 Kryn stood inside, both armed and armored. Guards that Thera had positioned here. They snapped to attention when they saw her, then looked at Ryan with obvious suspicion. Thera spoke quickly in Kryn, gesturing to Ryan. Whatever she said made the guards relax slightly, though they kept their weapons ready. Then Ryan saw her. Lyra was sitting on a couch in the back of the room, a data tablet in her hands. When the door opened, she looked up with those same golden eyes Ryan remembered from 5 years ago. Older now, maybe 11 or 12, but unmistakably the same child. "Mom!" she cried, dropping the tablet and running across the room. Thera caught her daughter in a tight embrace, her usual military composure cracking completely. She held Lyra close, one hand cradling the back of her head, murmuring something soft in their native language. Then Lyra pulled back slightly and saw Ryan standing near the door. She went completely still, staring at him like she'd seen a ghost. Her golden eyes went wide and her mouth opened slightly in shock. "I know you," she whispered. Her voice was young but clear, speaking human standard with barely any accent. "You're the soldier. The kind one. From the ruins." Ryan felt like someone had punched him in the chest. She remembered. After all these years, after everything that had happened, she actually remembered. He knelt down slowly, getting to her eye level. "Hi, Lyra," he said gently. "Your mom told me about you. Showed me pictures. You've gotten big." Lyra took a hesitant step toward him, then another. Tears were forming in her eyes. "You saved me," she said, her voice breaking. "I remember. You gave me your food even though you were hungry. You sang me human songs so I wouldn't be scared. You carried me through the fire and the explosions." Ryan's own throat felt tight. He'd thought about her so many times over the years, wondered if she remembered anything or if she'd been too young, too traumatized. "I'm really glad you made it," he managed to say. "Really glad you're okay." Lyra was crying now, tears running down her purple cheeks. "I tried to find you. After the war ended, I looked at pictures of human soldiers. I wanted to say thank you. Wanted to tell you that I was alive because of you." "You don't have to thank me," Ryan said. "You were just a kid who needed help. That's all." "You could have left me," Lyra said. "Everyone says humans and Kryn hate each other, that we're enemies forever. But you didn't leave me. You stayed." The moment was shattered by an explosion that was much, much closer than the first one. The entire apartment shook violently. Lights flickered. One of the guards stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Thera's communicator erupted with urgent voices. She listened for 2 seconds, then her face went hard. "They found us. Breached the security checkpoint. Coming this way now." The apartment door exploded inward before anyone could move. Not from weapons fire but from a shaped charge placed against the lock. 5 figures poured through the smoke and debris. Kryn extremists in black armor, weapons raised and ready. The lead figure was massive even by Kryn standards. Heavily scarred, one eye replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed red in the dim light. He radiated hatred and violence like a physical force. "There she is," he said, his voice deep and full of contempt. "The corrupted one. The weak little thing that chose human mercy over honorable death." Thera's guards opened fire immediately, but the extremists had better armor, better positioning. One guard went down in the first exchange, stunned and bleeding. The other ducked behind furniture, trying to provide cover. Thera stepped in front of Lyra instantly, her plasma rifle up and firing. Ryan moved beside her without thinking, his pistol adding to the defensive fire. They formed a wall between the extremists and Lyra. The scarred leader laughed, a horrible sound. "And the human pet is here too. How pathetic. Look at you, traitor. Fighting beside the species that murdered thousands of our people. You've betrayed everything we are." "No," a young voice rang out clearly through the chaos. Everyone stopped for a split second. Lyra had stepped forward, moving between her mother and the extremists. She was small, barely came up to Ryan's chest, but she stood with her shoulders back and her head high. "He's more honorable than you'll ever be," Lyra said, her voice shaking but determined. "He protected me when I was his enemy. When he had every reason to hate me. When helping me could have gotten him killed. What have you ever protected except your own hate?" The leader's face twisted with rage. "You dare speak to me, contaminated filth? You should have died in those ruins." He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Lyra. Ryan and Thera moved at exactly the same moment. Ryan tackled Lyra, pulling her down and covering her with his body. Thera opened fire with everything she had, her shots precise and devastating even in her fury. The fight that followed was absolute chaos. The extremists had numbers and firepower. But Thera fought like a force of nature, every shot deliberate, every movement calculated. She was protecting her daughter, and nothing in the universe could stop a mother defending her child. Ryan fought too, ignoring the pain when an energy bolt grazed his shoulder. Ignoring the exhaustion trying to drag him down. He'd saved Lyra once. He wasn't going to fail her now. He took hits that would have dropped most humans, but he kept moving, kept fighting, kept standing between the extremists and the child behind him. He used everything he had. Cover. Angles. The environment. His smaller size letting him move in ways the larger Kryn couldn't. He wasn't stronger than them. Wasn't faster. But he was desperate and stubborn and absolutely refused to quit. Station security finally arrived, drawn by the explosions and weapons fire. A dozen armed officers poured into the apartment, adding their firepower to the defense. The extremists found themselves suddenly outnumbered and outgunned. The scarred leader took a hit to his leg and went down hard. 2 more extremists fell. The remaining 2 grabbed their wounded leader and retreated, firing wildly to cover their escape. "This isn't over," the leader screamed as they dragged him away. "She dies contaminated and you all die with her." Then they were gone, disappearing into the station's maintenance corridors before security could seal the exits. In the sudden quiet, Ryan became aware of pain. His shoulder was burned where the energy bolt had hit. His ribs ached from where he'd taken a physical hit. Blood was running down his arm. Thera was beside him immediately, checking his wounds with professional efficiency. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," Ryan said automatically. "Is Lyra okay?" "I'm okay," Lyra's voice came from behind him. She crawled out from where he'd shielded her, completely unharmed. "You protected me again." Medical teams were arriving now, station personnel flooding in to help the wounded. The remaining guard was being treated. Security was setting up a perimeter. Thera pulled Ryan aside as the medics worked, Lyra holding onto her mother's hand but looking at Ryan with those wide golden eyes. "In my culture," Thera said formally, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I offer you a place in my family unit. Not as a debt or obligation but as family. True family. The highest honor my people can give." She looked at Lyra then back at Ryan. "You saved her once in war. Today you saved her again in peace. You've earned the right to be part of what we are. If you want it." Ryan looked at them both. The warrior mother who'd spent 2 years searching for him. The brave daughter who'd stepped between armed extremists to defend his honor. He thought about his empty apartment, his solitary life fixing engines, the loneliness he'd carried since the war ended. "Not because of debt," he said quietly. "But because I'd actually like that. If you're both sure." Lyra made a sound that was half laugh, half sob and ran forward. She hugged Ryan tightly, her arms wrapping around his waist. "Uncle Ryan," she said softly, testing the words. "Can I call you that? Uncle Ryan?" Ryan carefully put his good arm around her, holding this child he'd saved twice now. Once from rubble and bombs. Once from hatred and bullets. Yeah, he said, his voice rough. Yeah, I really like the sound of that. Thera placed her hand on his shoulder, the gesture both protective and accepting. You saved her once. Now we protect each other. Always. That's what family does. Ryan looked at her, then down at Lyra, still holding on to him. Always, he agreed.